Hello and welcome. My name is Lexi and today we're going to be taking a look at the new Sonia G Fundamentals Eye series. So these were kindly gifted to me from Sonia G and Beautylish. Thank you so much for sending these to me. And we have lots of comparisons, information. If you're looking for a ton of detail on these brushes, Sonia G has a blog, Sweet Makeup Temptations. I'll leave it linked down below in the description box. But she has so much information in her blog post. You know, she has comparisons on, with previous brushes that belong to her as well as other brands. She has reasons as to why she made things a certain way, more information about the handles and so forth. So I don't want to rehash all of that. We're going to highlight some of that. But I have to say, this is a really great eye set. If you have not yet tried Sonia G eyeshadow brushes, they are one of my most used. Like, I love her eye brushes in particular. And I think this is like the perfect starter set. It has really taken, kind of like some of the best of what she already has. And then she's made some changes to some. She's brought out some brand new brushes. So we have 8 brushes here. 4 of them are brand new shapes and 4 of them are shapes from her original Fundamental series that had the barrel handle. So these are no longer. Instead, we have these. And we have a walnut wood handle. I love walnut wood. I love the color. I love the grain. My dining room table used to be walnut wood. It's gorgeous. And you can see you've got just a really beautiful, kind of a medium rich brown with an obvious grain pattern. And I really love seeing that. The only thing is on some of them, because of the grain pattern, sometimes it's a little bit hard to read exactly the brush name. So when I first picked up a brush, I couldn't see it. I was like, oh, she didn't put the names on here this time. But they're there. And, sometimes, the grain pattern might make that a little bit hard to see at first, but it's definitely there. So we have 8 brushes, and I like to divide these up kind of into the categories. So we have 2 crease brushes. We have a Crease L and a Crease M, so large and medium. Let me put those down for a second. These 2 here are both new crease brushes. So you can see our handle here is going to be similar to that in like the Sky and the Pro series. So we have more of that tapered handle here, but instead we are working in maple wood. So it's a little bit, it's a little bit more elegant. It has a really timeless feel to it. We have the matte black ferrules. And these 2 crease brushes, as I mentioned, are new. We have the Crease M, which is going to be a bit stiffer. So if you've been looking for a small crease brush that really keeps the bristles in place, they don't splay out too much, that's the intention of this brush here. So let me just show you these, and then we have some demos. And I did the demos, so, we've got regular demos, but then we also have where I did one eye with the larger brushes and one eye with the smaller brushes, so you could really see the difference in how and where they place the shadows. I wanted to isolate them on the eye so you could really see exactly what each brush does on the eye. So we'll look at those in a minute. But the Crease M, again, when I first saw it, it made me think of the mini booster. We'll look at comparisons after the demos. It's not exactly like the mini booster. And the biggest difference is that this is going to really be a bit firmer, stays in place. We do have longer bristles here. And yeah, I think this is a really great, small crease brush. Then we have the Crease L here, and this is going to be a bit larger. Again, we do have a bit of a firmer stroke here with this, so the bristles aren't going to splay out too much, but we do have a larger surface area for blending. Now, one thing to know, all the brushes are going to be the feeling of Psycho goat hair. So here's the thing, with the food industry, hairs have become harder to get. They changed the classifications of your levels of the hairs over the years. As things change, quality levels might decline or change in some way. So these aren't technically labeled Psycho goat because now when they are sourcing the hairs, a lot of the source material is not labeled or identified into tiers. So what they did, what Sonia G and her team did, is they selected the softest hairs to feel like Psycho goat, but they are not technically classified that way just because things are sort of changing in the industry there. So you can think of them as Psycho goat hair, even though they don't technically have that classification. So all of the brushes in the set are either undyed or dyed, or a mix of dyed and undyed goat hair. So these crease brushes are undyed. And then we also have 2 worker brushes. So we have the Worker M and the Worker S, and these are actually going to be just a new version of the original Worker 2 and Worker 3 brushes respectively. So I have those. We'll look at those as well as some other brushes at the end when we're doing comparisons, but these 2 shapes are not new shapes. Next, we have the Builder M and the Builder S. And the Builder M is the same as the former Builder 3. So it's just a really nice flat shader brush. It tapers here. Again, we'll look at the comparison of that later. This is going to be dyed goat hair. It's very soft. And then the Builder S is actually a mix of dyed and undyed goat hair. And this is a brand new shape. You can see it's a little bit more narrow. It does remind me of some of her other brushes, but we'll take a look at those and see how they compare. But this is definitely a brand new, brush head size, shape, dimensions, and so forth. And then we have 2 pencil brushes. So we have the Pencil L and the Pencil S. So the Pencil L here was the Pencil 2 originally, and the Pencil S is a brand new shape here, brand new size. So we've got a larger and a smaller version. These are really great for detail work. I particularly like the Pencil L for like lower lash lines, smudging out something on the top, but the Pencil S is something we haven't had from Sonia G yet. It is a much smaller pencil brush that is great for small detail work. You could even use either of these, for like spot concealing and so forth as well. But this one here in particular, you can see we have a nice taper here. It's thin. You can really get, because these bristles don't splay very much, you can get a really thin, precise line. Whereas this one is definitely going to be a bit softer. You have a larger surface area covered. It's going to be great for smudging. So let's move on to the demos and the details while we talk about these. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at these brushes in pairs like we just did as I introduced them. And we'll look at the demos and the details for those brushes for that pair. And then we'll move on to comparisons before moving on. I think that's kind of the best way to really see how each of these perform. As I mentioned, we've got a couple of demos, but we also have one where I'm kind of showing you just what those brushes do on their own. So let's start off with the Crease L brush. And as I mentioned, this is going to be a very soft crease brush. This is actually going to be a new crease brush. We don't have one with exactly the same shape. It is similar to some of her previous ones, so we'll take a look at that. But what is very special about this one is it's sort of a blend of an airy crease brush because the outer bristles are fairly airy, but the center of it really has a lot of firmness and strength in those fibers. So they are going to kind of stay a bit more firm. They're going to stay in their position. So they work really well for adding something to a specific place and getting kind of a soft blend there without things splaying out so much and kind of getting a little bit messy. So I really like this brush. I love the firmness of this. It makes it easy, even if you have like hooded eyes or something, you can get into that spot without being too messy with it. And I really like that. That can be hard to find because a lot of the crease brushes that we see that are kind of this larger size, they don't necessarily have that firmer core. So you have to be a little bit more careful with application. So because the center of these bristles, kind of stays in place, it does make for a little bit more precision in application. So the brush itself is very soft and I think it's a really great brush. Now I have to say the Crease M, this one, And so it really kind of surprised me because when I first saw it, it made me think of brushes like the Refer 13 and 14 or the Mini Booster from Sonia G. But it is going to be different from all of those, mostly again because we have a little bit more stiffness and firmness in these bristles. So they're going to really stay where they are. This is a really great brush for applying something, in, for example, a tight area like a deep set crease or so forth without necessarily, splaying out and moving things beyond the targeted area. So I think that's kind of what makes this brush special, is because it is going to be a bit more firm. However, it's still very soft. And we do have a bit of a tapered, both of the crease brushes actually taper at the top. So you can blend this out and get a little bit of airiness, but it really does kind of stay in place. And you can see the difference in the demos with the surface area that they cover on my eyes. So let's take a look at these brushes and some comparisons. We're going to start off with the Crease L. So here's the Crease L. You can see that we have kind of a tapered shape here. We have a round ferrule, which makes this work really well in a circular motion. You can also do back and forth, which, is ideal for a crease brush. It's very versatile. Again, if you didn't want to just use these on the eyes, this is something that you could use with, like small areas of like liquid or cream highlighter, or even like targeted concealer spots and so forth. But I think this is just a really great crease brush for the eyes. So a few comparisons here. I think the closest out of the Sonia G brushes that I have, at least, I have almost all of them. I think I'm only missing one or two brushes. But this is a Crease 2. So this is one of her originals. You can see here that the ferrule diameter is actually going to be a little bit wider here in the Crease 2. This is our original fundamental handle with the barrel shape. And if we look at the brush heads themselves, keep in mind, even when some of these brushes are repeats of, a former one, we've got different batches of hairs, which might have slightly different diameters, which changes things. We have, obviously it's been years, everything's hand done. So there will always be minor changes. So you can see that these are going to be similar, but the shape is slightly different. You can see that these are going to be a little bit longer, more vertical here before we have that taper. And look at the performance. So this is the Crease L versus the Crease 2. This one also is fairly firm, but it's also a little bit wider. You can see we have a bit more of the hair splaying out. So this actually covers a broader surface area. Another brush from Sonia G, this is the Crease Pro. You can see that this is going to be a smaller crease brush. We have a similar shape here. However, the Crease Pro it's pretty much smaller all the way around. Our diameter is slightly smaller. The bristles are slightly shorter. So overall, it's going to be a bit smaller. Performance-wise, they're going to both feel very similarly in how the fibers react. This is just a slightly smaller version of the Crease L. Now, this is the Refer 15. Again, we have a similar shape, similar size, but the Refer 15 is actually going to be a little bit larger. It's got a wider diameter here. And you can see that this one is going to be a bit more of an airy brush in comparison to the Crease L. So that's going to be our main difference, is the airiness in the 15. It's also slightly larger. And my last comparison here, this is the Hakuhodo B142. And again, similar shape. We have kind of the same taper, similar dimensions there. Our diameters are pretty similar. The Hakuhodo feels ever so slightly smaller. This, however, though, we do have like a firm core in here, but it's not going to be as firm as the Sonia G. The Sonia G stays a little bit more compacted than the Hakuhodo, which is just slightly airier. Now, moving on to the Crease M. As I said, this is a brand new shape. You can see how well things kind of stay in position here. Again, we have a round ferrule. And the first brush that made me think of in the Sonia G line is the Mini Booster. The Mini Booster does have a larger diameter and shorter bristles. This is dyed goat hair, and it is going to be a bit airier. So this is going to perform a little differently than the Crease M. The mini booster I think is better more for like shadow application on the sides and so forth versus crease work. Whereas these longer bristles will really help if you have like hooded or deep set eyes and you kind of need to get in a little bit further, and the firmness there really makes a difference. I also wanted to look at a couple of Rephr brushes. So this is the Rephr 14. You can see the Rephr 14. It is going to be a little bit wider in diameter. Our bristle length is pretty similar. This is going to be a little bit, they're both rounded and tapered at the top, but the Rephr 14 is a little bit flatter, whereas this is going to be a little bit more of a peak. So here again is the Crease M versus the Rephr 14, which you can see is going to be a little bit airier, but they are going to be, this is a slightly bigger version. I also wanted to compare that to the Rephr 13, which is a smaller version of the 14, but you can see we have more of a flat top on the 13. The bristles are shorter. Our diameter is pretty similar, but because this is going to have a flatter top, it does perform a little differently, and you can see that with use, it does splay out a bit more. Now, Rephr has recently introduced their Mini and Max brushes, so I wanted to compare a couple of those as well. This is the 15 Mini. You can see handle lengths on these brushes are pretty similar. The Rephr is ever so slightly shorter than the Sonia G, but this is the 15 Mini. You can see we have a similar shape, but the 15 Mini is going to be larger than the Crease M. So the 14 Mini, though, is going to be smaller. So it's shorter hairs, smaller diameter. It is similar, but this is actually going to be a little bit airier as well. So those are all some brushes that are similar. None of them are exactly the same, but you do have some similar options that you might already have in your collection. Next, we're moving on to the worker brushes. So let's start off with the Worker M. And this is the previous Worker 2 brush. And so this is not a new shape. And this is, an ideal brush for, lay down in a larger area. This is going to have a bit of a width to it. So you could even use this in your crease. This is kind of like your all-purpose eyeshadow brush. And the Worker S is essentially a smaller version of that. And that's going to be equivalent to the previous Worker 3 brush. So both of these brushes are really nice all-purpose brushes. You can use them to put color all over. Again, if you want to use them on the face, they work well with things like concealer and so forth. But because of the shape of these, you can use the kind of the flat surface of this. You could use the tip, you can use the side. They're very versatile. So they're a great all over brush, great for one and done. They're pretty much a multi-purpose eyeshadow brush. So, I have to say, I think these are both really great. They both perform really well with shimmers. And because of the shape of these, they don't splay out a lot either, which allows you to, it kind of prevents, excess fallout from shadows. So if you're working with shimmers or something a little bit drier and more powdery, because these are not splaying out too much, you're not going to have very much fallout with those. And yeah, I think these are great. Again, they are undyed goat hair, so you can use them with creams, liquids, powders, and they're just a really versatile all-purpose brush. So let's go ahead and take a look at the originals of these and some comparisons. So here's the Worker M, and this is the Worker 2, the original Worker 2. Now, again, because we do have different batches, these are many years different from each other, everything changes a little bit. Everything's hand placed. So you can see that my original Worker 2 is a little bit more square than the Worker M, which tapers a little bit more here. You can see that the flat surface on the top is a bit smaller. So that is something that can happen just with a batch difference. But they are going to be the same brush head. So everything about the brush head should be exactly the same. So if you already have this one, it's going to perform the same way as the new Worker M. So in comparison, here's the Worker S. You can see it's a smaller version. So Worker S, Worker M. And you can see the shape's the same, but you know, it is slightly smaller. And the Worker S is going to be the same as the Worker 3. Now again, this is a much older brush. It's been used more. We've got different batches. So it does look like my bristles splay out a little bit more. And they do naturally, you know, it's a bit older. You can see how firm it is. And actually, you know, again, that can be partly with the difference here of the batches and so forth. But I would have to say they are supposed to have the exact same brush head. But I do have to say that my original Worker 3 feels a bit firmer. Whereas the Worker S now feels a little bit softer, and I feel like the hairs on my original Worker 3, they feel a little shorter when I'm using it here versus the Worker S, which just feels a little bit smoother. So just something to note, but again, they're going to be the exact same brush head essentially. Now here's the Worker M and the Worker S, and I did want to compare it to a couple others. So we've got the Worker Pro and the Soft Shader, which are two of my favorite brushes from Sonia G. And you can see that these are both going to be a little bit shorter, a little bit smaller than the Worker M and the Worker S. You can see that the Worker the Worker S and the Soft Shader, they're going to have a similar depth here. But the bristles on the Soft Shader, they are going to be a little bit more rounded. Our diameter here is a little bit smaller, and they're a little bit shorter. So the Soft Shader is going to be a bit smaller overall. I think that's a really great lay down brush for the lid, but the workers are going to be just slightly better all purpose because it is easier to get into the crease, particularly the Worker M. Now the Worker Pro, you can see, is going to be about the same length of bristles as the Worker S, but it is going to be a little bit more narrow. Our depth and our width is a little bit smaller. So they're going to perform slightly differently as well. Again, great for all over color on the lid. The small size helps you be a bit more precise. Now moving on to the Builder brushes. The Builder M is going to be dyed goat hair, and this was formerly the Builder 3 brush. The Builder M is your typical shader style brush. We have a little bit more of that square shape. It's flat. One of the things that this, you know, your Builder M is going to be your typical shader brush. You have more of that square, flat shape. It's really great for laying down like shimmers and things like that because you don't have many bristles splaying out. And, you know, it's really nice for precision. You can use this for smudging as well. Now, the Builder brushes in general, you know, they're a little different from your average shader because they are going to be a little bit thicker, a little bit wider. So that is what allows them to also be good smudger brushes. Now the Builder M is dyed goat hair. The bristles are very, very soft. So although you can use this as a smudger, I do actually prefer using other brushes more so as a smudger because this is a little bit softer. So you're going to get a really soft smudge. I prefer the pencil brushes for that. But it's definitely something you can do. You can add a little definition to the lash line with these. You know, if you're looking for more of that soft smudged look, this is a really great one for that. And I think this is definitely, it's probably one of the best brushes from Sonia G in general, just because it is such a versatile shader brush. You know, the Sonia G Soft Shader, I talk about that one from the eye set all the time. I have 5 of them, I think, 5 or 6. And it's one that I use pretty much every day. But this is going to be a little bit more compact than that one. And I think it's a really versatile brush. If you use shimmers a lot, this is sort of one of those must-have brushes, unless you already, of course, have something very similar. But this style of brush is definitely one that's a must-have for shimmers. Now, the Builder S, this is going to be a mix of dyed and undyed goat hair. And this is a brand new shape. So we definitely have a thinner, more narrow brush. We still have that width or thickness when you look at this brush sideways. We have a taper there. It's very soft. This, it kind of reminds me a little bit of the flat definer in the dimensions. That was what it made me first think of. But again, we've got a bit more width to this. This is very soft. This one here is intended more for like detail work. You can smudge with this one as well, but it is going to be a smaller surface area. So this brush, essentially, you can use as a pencil brush. I also really like this for adding color to the inner corner. You could use it to deepen the outer corner as well if you're looking for something with a bit more precision. If you want to use this, on the lid for all over color, it is a little small for that. It definitely has a great, final finished look there. You can see that in the demos. But this is really going to be a brush that's more ideal for, working in smaller areas. Sonia G actually recommends using this for like a halo eye to place a shimmer and so forth. So I think it's a really nice brush. And if you do have like hooded eyes, really deep set eyes, this is going to be one of those brushes that allows you to lay down color or product, where you want it without, necessarily being so wide or fluffy that it's getting in places that you don't want. So I think it's really great for that. And as I do get older, your eyes become a little bit more naturally hooded for most people. And that is definitely something that I am looking for more in eye brushes as my eyes age as well. So let's take a look at some comparisons. We're going to start off here with the Builder M brush. And you can see we've got the Daigo hair. We have this flat shader style, but we do have some width here on the side. So this one here is going to be the same brush as the Builder 3 that we had before. Again, any differences in the shape are purely from batches and the fact that, it's been many years. But this is my original Builder 3. And yeah, so we still have that width there. I have to say though, they're both really great. My original Builder 3 does seem a little bit more square, whereas this one is slightly more rounded. Again, probably just a batch difference, but I do prefer this slightly more rounded one. It just makes it a little bit easier to be precise when I'm getting closer to the inner corner of my eye. So again, original Builder 3, that is going to be your same brush head. And then I want to take a look at a few others. This here is the Builder from the Fusion set. You can see our brush heads are going to be pretty similar. The Fusion is going to be a mix of undyed goat hair and 2 different types of synthetic bristles. So again, here is our Builder M and the Builder from the Fusion set. Now the Fusion set, I feel like this does have a little bit more firmness to it than the Builder L or Builder M. So the Builder M is very soft. It definitely has that firmness, the stiffness of the fibers, but I feel like the Fusion one is even slightly more firm. And this one here is the Builder Pro. And you can see that our Builder Pro is going to be more rounded. And, we have a little bit more of a steeper curve to it than the Builder M. We have a similar thickness, and the Builder Pro bristles are going to be a little bit longer. So you can see this is going to be a little bit longer, a little bit softer. The more compact bristles here allow it to just kind of stay in the same spot a little bit more. Now, this here is a small shader brush from Tancedo. It is undyed goat hair. I just wanted to show you, this is more of your average shader style brush. You can see how much thinner it is here. And you can see, how the bristles here really bend more than those in the Builder M. Because we have a thicker base of bristles down here at the bottom, this wider, thicker base down here is preventing as much bending of the hairs here, whereas the thinner shader brushes end up being more flexible. So, slight differences there, but it will affect performance. I really like something like this that has a little bit more flexibility for applying like a cream or a liquid, whereas this I think is going to be a little bit more versatile, works really well with powders. Now, dyed goat hair I would recommend using with powders. And one more here, we have the Rephr 02 brush. This is also a nice shader. It's not going to be as wide as the Sonia G, and we do have a bit more of a square top. Again, this is more of a traditional shader, but it is going to be a little bit wider. So again, we're not having as much of a bending effect as we get with the Tancedo because we do have a thicker base here. But it is going to be still a little bit different from the Sonia G, which we've got the thicker base that then tapers up. So just some differences there. Now we have the Builder S, which is going to be a much smaller builder brush. And I want to compare this to a few brushes. This one here is the flat definer from Sonia G. As I mentioned, the flat definer is going to be smaller, but I did want to compare kind of the size of the like actual width and so forth. You can see we have more width sideways here than the flat definer, which is going to be a little bit smaller overall, but our width going this way, looking at it flat-wise, is going to be about the same. So you can see how the Builder S performs versus our flat definer here. So this is really great for small areas, lining and so forth, but this one here has a bit more width. I think of this more as something great for precision work with color. You can use this for liner. It can double as a pencil brush as well. So this is going to be a little bit thicker at the top than the flat definer, so you will get a thicker line than you would with the flat definer. Another Sonia G brush I wanted to take a look at. This is one of her special brushes. This is the S1. So this one you can see is also going to be kind of a small, similar shape, but this is going to be thinner here. It's smaller overall. And you can see this here is going to be very, very soft, very, very flexible. It does not have that firmness that we get with the Builder S. A couple of other brushes. This one here is the Rephr 28. You can see this is still a small shader, but it's going to be larger than the Builder S. We have a square shape, but longer bristles. Our width is still going to be a little bit wider in the Sonia G than the Rephr. We also have the Rephr 02 Mini. So this is going to be a smaller version. Again, it's going to be more narrow, shorter, square shape. And you can see this one really stays put very well. It's also great for precision, but notice that our tip is going to be a little bit wider because this has a square shape versus the tapered shape here. This is the Spectrum and Katie Jane Hughes brush 20. Again, a nice small precision shader style brush, but our actual depth here, our width is going to be more narrow in the Spectrum. These are synthetic. They stay firm pretty well. I think this one works really nicely with creams and liquids, but this Sonia G is going to work better with your powders and adding things exactly where you want them. We do have a little bit more movement of the bristles in the Sonia G versus the Katie Jane Hughes. And last up, this is a Lancome brush. This is number 12. So this is a small shader brush. You can see that this actually would kind of go straight up and then we have a bit more of that arch, whereas this has more of a gradual taper on the sides. This is going to be a little bit wider at the top than the Sonia G. Our width is still going to be a little bit more in the Sonia G versus the Lancome, but this one is a bit closer. So between these, the Sonia G is softer than the Lancome. The Lancome, it's just a little bit scratchier in general than the Sonia G. And let's move on to our pencil brushes. And we're going to start off with the Pencil L brush. And the Pencil L is going to be the same as the previous Pencil 2. The Pencil S is going to be new. Now, the Pencil 2, this is going to be a little bit of a bigger pencil brush. This is really great for smudging. You know, you've got that really tapered tip so you can get into smaller places. But overall, we still have a wide base, which helps keep things kind of a little bit firm yet soft. And because overall our tip and so forth is going to be wider, this is not going to give you like a really thin line if you're trying to use this to line your eyes. This is really going to be best for smudging things out. Again, this is a brush that I sometimes use for spot concealing, for like a zit or something like that, because I do think it's a great size for that. So the Pencil 2, or Pencil L now, I think is a really great versatile pencil brush. And, I've got some comparisons for that. Now let's move on to the Pencil S, because this one is a new shape. The first brush that came to mind when I saw this was the Refer 23, so we will be comparing that. But this is a new brush size and shape from Sonia G. So we still have, kind of that tapered pencil shape, but this is going to be much smaller than anything she has. Previously, her smaller pencil brushes were things like the Flat Definer, so something that's going to be more of a horizontal line. Whereas this is going to be something great, if you do like any sort of graphic work with shadows or makeup where, you are actually like painting like designs on your face. This is a brush you can use for that. This is one that you can use to get a very thin eyeshadow line. Is it going to be as thin as something like the Hermes liner brush gives you? No, that one's super, super thin, but this is going to give you a very thin line. You can actually use this, use the brush to get eyeliner on it, like cake or from a pencil or so forth, and kind of apply it that way to get a very thin line, which actually can sometimes, depending on what kind of pencil you're using, as you're using the pencil, the tip kind of gets a little bit wider, especially on the creamier ones. This can really help you keep that precise line with some of those creamier products, because it really stays pretty firm to the tip, and we do have a very thin, small surface area at the tip. I think it's a really great brush. So let's go ahead and take a look at some comparisons. All right, so here is the Pencil L. And this one here is going to be the same as the original Pencil 2. However, my original Pencil 2 is not quite as tapered. You can see mine is more flat. So just something to note there. But yeah, I really like this new, I love this size, the shape. I love the tapered tip. But it made me think a little bit also of the Pencil 1, which I have several of these. They are going to be a little bit more tapered than the Pencil 2 was, but they are much smaller. So this one will stay a bit firmer. You can see how little movement that there actually is on the tip, versus this one here, the Pencil L, which is going to be much softer to use there. So that was one I wanted to take a look at. I also wanted to look at this one here. This is the Chikuhodo T8. And you can see that this is going to be a longer pencil brush. We have a taper, but it does not taper as firmly as the Sonia G. And this one is also going to be very soft, but you can see it splays out significantly more than the Sonia G, which really has that firm core. This is the Refer 26. And I would say out of the Refer brushes, this is probably the most similar. And you can see our shape is very similar. The Sonia G point is perhaps just a little bit firmer than the Refer 26, but these are actually pretty close. I would say that the Sonia G stays a little bit more compacted than the Refer. It feels like it is slightly more dense, and you can actually see that our ferrule is going to be a little bit wider in the Sonia G. So this one will stay just a little bit tighter as you're working with it, whereas the Refer will splay just a little bit more, giving you a softer smudge. And then this is the What's Up Beauty R109, and you can see, again, similar. Our diameters are pretty similar, but we don't get to as much of a taper at the tip. You can see this is going to stay a bit more rounded at the tip. It stays, again, pretty firm and compact while you're using it, but we don't really have that pointier tip. It's going to be more rounded. So just some differences there. And this is the Pencil Pro. So you can see the Pencil Pro, again, we don't have as much of a taper. They're very similar, but Pencil Pro diameter is a little bit smaller, and it's almost as though we kind of cut off the tip part there. So just a little difference there. This will stay a bit firmer. I love this for under the eye as well, but yeah, they're going to be similar. This will have a little bit more movement because they do have longer bristles. So you can see how this one will move compared to the Pencil Pro, which really stays pretty tight and true to this shape throughout its movement. Now, here's the Pencil S. So the first one I wanted to take a look at was the Rephr 23. You can see these are not going to be the same. The Rephr 23 does have a smaller diameter overall, but we don't have as pointy of a tip as we do with the Sonia G. So the Sonia G is going to be a little bit pointier than the Rephr. These are both going to give you a very thin line. They both work very well for that. But because the tip is going to be a little bit more tapered on the Sonia G, we can get a finer line with the Sonia G than we do with the Rephr. However, they do perform pretty similarly overall. And then another one I want to look at, this is the What's Up Beauty in R101. And these are very similar in shape. The R101 is just a little bit bigger. Our bristles are a little bit longer and our diameter is a little bit wider, but everything's pretty much the same otherwise. So they're going to be pretty similar. And yeah, again, for a finer line, the Sonia G, because it is a bit smaller, our tip is going to be a little bit more pointy. That's going to give you the finer line. So overall, I have to say the new Sonia G Fundamental Eye Series, I think, is a fantastic set. People are always asking me which eye set from Sonia G would you recommend to start with. And, you know, it's always been really hard to choose between the Sky and the Pro Series. I would have to say that these kind of cover all of your bases, with those now becoming like nice additions. So if you are looking for a starter eye series, this, you know, you can't go wrong with the fundamentals. Now, if you've been somebody who's been buying Sonia G for years, you have some of the original fundamentals, you know, thankfully these are being sold as a set and individually. So you don't have to duplicate any shape. So I think that's really great. You know, selling them both individually and as a set really kind of meets everybody's needs. But if you are looking for a beginner set, or you're refreshing your eyeshadow brushes, I think this is an awesome set. It really covers all of your bases. You've got a variety of different shapes, sizes, functions, and so forth. So you can really just kind of hit everything to, you know, regardless of what your eye shape is. It's very versatile, very functional. And, you know, I do want to mention, you know, because you are selling these individually as well, you don't have to duplicate any brushes that you already have. If you've been purchasing Sonia G for years, you have any of the original fundamentals, or perhaps you have some of her Pro or Sky series brushes that seem fairly similar. So, you know, I think this was really great. Now, these brushes are not limited edition. However, once these sell out, they will be back, but it might be a while before they come back. And it's really going to depend on, you know, how well these do as to how long they stick around. But hopefully these will be permanent for a very long time. And yeah, I think this is a really great brush set. And if I had to pick my favorites, as for favorites, it's really hard to do that. I don't think I can actually name favorites, but out of the new shapes, I would say my two favorites from the new shapes would be the Pencil S, because I really love how fine of a line you can get with that. And then the Builder S, because I think it is more unique, something that I don't quite have. So those would be my two favorites out of the new shapes. If I take into account some of the older shapes as well, it's really hard to kind of put that in there. Following that though, for new shapes, I would go with the Crease M. I think this is a really great crease brush, and again, not exactly like any of the others that I have. And then the Crease L is just going to be a great all-purpose crease brush. Now, the Worker M, I really love for one and done eyeshadows. I think it works great for that. And the Worker S for the same reason, but this is also great just for lid color, not even just one and done. The Builder M, fantastic for shimmers, lay down color. And then the Pencil L, I love for smudging as well as for spot concealing. So I think overall, all of the brushes have a purpose. They're very functional. They work well together or on their own. And, you know, I just think this is a fantastic set. Thank you so much to Sonia G and Beautylish for sending me these. And yeah, I really appreciate it. Let me know what you think of these brushes, and I can't wait to hear from you down below in the comments. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll see you very soon. Have a great day.